Hi, I'm Tony Northrup, and for my photography buying guide, I have what might be the most bizarre mirrorless camera you're ever going to see. This is the Leica Monochrom M, and this camera makes that Nikon DF, the retro Nikon, look like it's for posers, because this camera is hardcore retro. Like, it is the real deal. This is not a DSLR that's been like tweaked to look retro. This is a film camera that has had a digital back added to it. The Monochrom takes these same Leica M lenses that they've been producing for many, many decades. They have a long and storied history for producing fantastic and expensive glass, and the bodies too. And in fact, this body will run you 8K. No. And this lens, which is one of the cheapest lenses, will run you about 2K. The basic lenses they have will cost you about 2K, and the more expensive lenses will cost you 5 or 6K. So this setup that I'm holding in my hands right here, believe it or not, 10K. So for 10K, you might be expecting some amazing features, that right? No, you're gonna be in for a surprise because it is the least feature-laden camera I've ever held in my hands, and including like the early digital cameras. This has no color. It's a black and white only camera, which is pretty remarkable. It also has no support for autofocus regardless of the lens that you put on it. It's manual focus only. The metering system is rudimentary. Not only does it not have an electronic viewfinder, but it has this kind of what will seem strange to people who don't shoot film, split prism focusing viewfinder. You can see it has like a separate area that you look through and a separate area over here for focusing. It has aperture priority, but it completely lacks shutter priority. Bizarre, right? And also the ergonomics are fairly appalling on it. If you're used to a modern DSLR, you're probably used to a grip, which feels good in your hands. And this doesn't have a grip. And in fact, you constantly feel like you're going to drop it because it's almost shaped to slip out of your hands. It's also mostly this smooth metal. There's a little bit of leather here, but the leather, actually, you can't even grip it. There's not a lot of texture to it. This is the way that Leicas have looked for 80 years or however long they've been around. You can hold this up against a Leica film body and you won't notice any particular difference until you look at the back and you see this display. So the design isn't chosen for ergonomics or usability. It's chosen for historic reasons because people who love Leicas and they don't want Leicas to change. This really is an old Leica film camera with digital capabilities. So you can't really compare this camera to a modern digital camera. It's a different animal. It's designed for historic and legacy reasons. It's designed for people who love the look and feel of a film camera rather than for people who are just trying to produce results and take pictures. But I am going to compare it to modern digital cameras just so we have a point of reference. Now, it does have a distinct advantage because it's black and white. The digital sensor doesn't need to have that red, blue, green bare filter on it. Now with a traditional color digital sensor, each pixel only detects red, blue, or green lights within a specific range of frequencies. So that means if you're filming something that is totally green, you're only using 2 out of 4 pixels. And if you're filming something that's blue, you're using 1 out of 4 pixels. Something red only uses 1 out of 4 pixels as well. So you're dropping most of your light because of this bare filter. Well, this monochromatic filter will be able to capture 100% of light because it's only measuring luminance. It basically doesn't care what the color of the light coming in is. It just cares how much light is coming into each pixel. So I think it might have an advantage in detail over a color sensor. So I brought it into the test environment to compare it against my 5D Mark III desaturated. So native black and white versus desaturated color, but on a Canon sensor. Let's see how they compare.
Here we have the M on the left and the 5D Mark III on the right. The aperture here is incorrect. I had it at f4 to match the 5D Mark III, and it just didn't read it properly from the lens. What can I say? Leica sent me the camera and it didn't seem to work properly. Zooming in, this is more of a comparison of the lenses than the sensors, but you can see the 70 to 200 f2.8 Canon is substantially sharper. than the Leica 90mm. Let's check out the noise levels and the shadows. You can see at ISO 320, the M Monochrom does indeed have substantially less noise than the 5D Mark III shows in its desaturated pictures. Let's jump up to ISO 800. Again, zooming in, the Leica seems to have less noise than the Canon. Jumping up to ISO 6400. Here the two cameras to my eye seem roughly equal, though the Canon might have a bit of an edge here. They're both awfully noisy at this high ISO.
So let's talk about using the viewfinder. Use the viewfinder, of course, to frame your picture and to focus it, because it's manual focus. You need to be looking through there to line everything up, and it's going to be a really unusual experience. In my experience, the split prism focusing is far more precise than trying to manually focus with a traditional DSLR, which is looking through the lens, because they don't have any special focusing screen for that sort of manual focusing. And you just can't get sharp results with any modern digital camera when you're manually focusing, which is why I always tell people to autofocus, even if they're focusing snobs. But with this Leica, you really can get good results with manual focusing. With that said, it's still slower and less accurate than any other modern autofocus system. So there's no practical reason to use that manual focus. But if you enjoy manual focusing and you want that split prism look, you're pretty much stuck with the modern Leica M series cameras. So I've talked about the camera itself. Let's talk about the accessories, lenses, flashes, etc. Leica, of course, has an amazing history of producing fantastic compact lenses, and indeed they are really small, and they do produce fantastic results for their size. You know, my experience with these lenses is they don't produce quite as sharp results as you would get from using a big Canon 70 to 200 lens. This is a 90mm f2.8 that I'm using here, f2.5 actually, and it is a good portrait lens. But the results are not as sharp as you'll get from a modern Canon or Nikon lens. They're just not. But those lenses are also way bigger. So for the size, this is definitely the sharpest results that I've ever seen. And you can get a massive number of Leica lenses used on eBay, and they're still manufacturing a ton of new lenses too. And there are other lenses that are far sharper than this example that I have here, and faster too. So they have an incredible collection of lenses available for you. You can also get flashes for your Leica system. Leica, however, is not known for their flashes. They do provide a variety of different flashes, and like their lenses, they're going to be more expensive than the Canon or Nikon or Sony alternatives. Some of them do support TTL, which will make the process of exposure a lot easier for you. It can be a real pain to manually expose lenses with a manual exposure camera. And you're also not going to have any third-party options from, say, Yongnuo. But you know what? Leica really is not about using flash or any external light at all. It's about using natural light, usually with like a 50mm lens. That's the whole Leica experience. So you're not going to get great flashes with this, but you're not really looking at flashes, are you, to use with your Leica? Let's talk about the metering system in it a little bit. Now, a lot of people are going to insist on manually dialing in the shutter speed with this dial on top, and then setting the aperture using the aperture ring on the lens. You'll set the ISO by using the menu system on the back. It's kind of a silly way to do it. I wish they had a dial for the ISO too, though I know that would have required them to break from the film tradition. Of course, in the film era, if you want to change the ISO, you had to swap your film out. You had to basically burn the rest of the roll of film and then stick a different ISO of film in. So it's still more convenient than that. If you're coming from a film camera, you'll be thrilled you can. But I didn't like having to go through the menus to change the ISO because I find that a really important setting. When you're not all manual and you want to use the auto exposure system, maybe you're taking candids or you're doing street photography where you're going from shade to full sunlight, you might be disappointed. It tends to be extremely unreliable. Any reflective or bright surfaces will completely throw off the exposure system. I found I was getting an awful lot of under and overexposed pictures compared to the results that I get with traditional DSLR. But again, that's really not the Leica experience. They include an auto exposure system of some kind, and that's kind of nice. You should be thankful for that, because most people using Leicas will be setting all these things manually because that's kind of the preference. I will also add that this camera completely lacks exposure compensation. So you're stuck using whatever the metering system comes up with, or switching to manual to make adjustments. What I think works best is to go manual with the ISO and aperture and shutter speed, and then use the little visual indicators. They have these very like 1980 style lights that show you whether you're underexposed or overexposed, and just kind of dial up the aperture or shutter speed until you get it about what the exposure system thinks is right. And then if you know that the exposure system would traditionally underexpose or overexpose based on the backlighting or some other condition, then you can manually adjust it using those settings. So I said a lot of negative things about this Leica, but I really do love it. And I love all Leicas. They just have a certain feel to them. They're built like a brick. And it's so much fun to go completely manual. In fact, it's so much fun that when I'm shooting just for fun and not professional work, I almost always use one of these film cameras in the back here. And I don't even use film cameras with batteries or electronics. I use all manual, like spring-loaded cameras, because that's what I enjoy. And that's why I asked to review this Leica M Monochrom. And for that, it's absolutely wonderful. But I know a lot of readers are going to be interested in it and already used to modern DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, and kind of starting from that viewpoint. They're not going to be starting from the perspective of a film shooter thinking about going digital. If that's the case, then you'll be thrilled with the Leica. But if you're shooting other cameras and you're very results focused, you'd probably be really disappointed with this just as a digital camera, because that's not the intention of it. The intention of it is to go back to the 1960s when everybody was shooting black and white. And exposure systems were a cutting edge but still unreliable type thing. Back when 2 frames a second seemed like a pretty good speed, and where every frame counts and you wouldn't want to burn through a whole roll of film in just a few seconds. Anyway, that's what the Leica is. It's a black and white film camera without the inconvenience of having to develop your film or go into the darkroom to print it. You can get all of that experience and still use Adobe Lightroom instead of a physical darkroom. Now, people who love Leicas say that they love them because they're special. And they are. You can tell when you feel it and when you use it. If you feel and use a Leica and you don't think it's special, then this is definitely not the camera for you. A very small portion of my audience is going to want this Leica. But for those of you who do, I highly advise you to go check one out first and see if you like it before you drop 10 grand on it. This video is part of my photography buying guide. It's a paperback book and ebook that you can buy at sdpcommunity.com, ships worldwide, or you can go directly to Amazon and buy it. It has a ton of videos in it and just a massive amount of information in there. It's also constantly growing, so you'll buy it once and then I will update it for life. It's like a subscription, a lifetime subscription, my lifetime, not yours. I might die first, I don't know, but I'm gonna try to stay alive so I can keep updating that book. But once you buy it for that flat rate, you'll get constant updates with new videos and all the information about new gear that you can handle. So go check it out. And if you want to see more free videos like this, click subscribe and like down below. And any questions, just add a comment and I will write back to you. Thanks.